Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's the It's Got Star Trek podcast.
Where am I?
In my apartment. What's left of it. I'm Alicia Travers.
Jonathan Archer.
Pleased to meet you. What's the last thing you remember?
I was in a truck with a couple of German soldiers. There was an explosion. Someone started shooting at us. I got away.
You sure did. And your SS friends? They're dead, which is how I like them. You're my first bona fide POW. I usually fix up guys in the resistance. Easy, sailor. You don't want to start bleeding again.
Sailor?
Yeah, that patch on your shirt says Enterprise. You must have made it off before it sank. How'd you wind up all the way over here?
I've been asking myself the same question.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Yes, let's do it. Let's do this podcast.
Evidence.
Okay. All right. Yes, let's get right into it this week. Because this week, as it happens, this particular week, I don't know which number week this is in the year. Because we don't generally keep track of things that way, do we? We don't generally do that.
Which way?
What? You know where like people are like, this is the 30th week of the month or the year?
Who does that?
I guess not a lot of people,
Nerds.
but there's no particular reason not to. But I was just pointing out to the audience that we do not do that.
No.
We keep track of the number of, this is which episode of the podcast?
They
204.
They too probably do not do that. The audience.
We don't need to do that because we divide them up, the weeks up into months.
It's like, what are you, like out in space keeping track of shit?
Like, it's more efficient to say it's the 15th day of the 12th month rather than like it's the 51st week of whatever.
But is it efficient to have the months have a bunch of ridiculous numbers of numbers?
Different numbers of have different.
Some of them have this many numbers,
No,
and some of
that's-
them have another amount of
No,
numbers.
I wouldn't-
And then there's that one month.
No.
I don't want to say it out loud, but I think we know what we're talking about.
It's a little freaky.
But when you can divide things up into P parts, when you divide things up into P parts.
What kind of pea parts?
So if you have 200 things, it's better to divide them up into like groups.
Yeah,
So
I agree. Yes, all of that is.
except if you're like a timestamp on a computer, and then
if
it doesn't.
you are a timestamp,
then you are a millisecond.
Okay, is that a joke or is there's no joke in there?
There's no joke in there.
No, but it had the cadence of a joke.
I guess if you were a millisecond or a timestamp or a whatever.
And all
if you
of
were
that.
Jesse, if you were a timestamp, you'd be a millisecond.
Okay, yeah, see what I'm saying? It sounds like it's supposed to be a joke that I'm just not clever enough to get.
It wouldn't be
Do you
funny.
think it's a
Your
joke?
mama.
Do you think it's a joke that you're just not clever enough to get, even though you're the one who made it?
Yes.
All right.
I think though that wasn't a joke
I
because
think a lot of things could
what
go
I said
like
wasn't a joke because timestamps are in milliseconds. So if I wanted to be a joke, I'd be like, Jesse, if you were a timestamp, you'd be in centoseconds or whatever.
Centoseconds.
Centoseconds.
See, that's to me. That wasn't funny at all.
nanoseconds.
Like, yeah.
There's
Well, you
nothing
just don't
funny
get
about
it. You're not smart enough to get it. Is the
Okay.
problem.
Again, all of that is a very long distance way of getting around to the topic, which is that this week we are hosting for you, the audience, the 204th episode of this podcast, which is called the It's Got Star Trek podcast.
Those are P-51s.
Yes, and as hinted at by Dan,
nice plane.
Dan has just laid down a clip for us from
Laid it down.
from this episode. It's actually 2 episodes because this is a 2-parter.
But it could arguably be a 3-parter, but it's not because this part of Enterprise was very serial. But like I watched actually the previous episode, and this does stand on its own as a 2-parter.
Okay, all right. So we have to say what the title is, even though
Do we?
Even though I know the people have clicked on the button, they will know what the title is. They know that we are discussing Star Trek, Enterprise, Stormfront, parts 1 and 2. Jesse's got the stylophone going this week. Stormfront, it's the 2-part opener to the 4th season, the 4th and last, as it turns out, season of Star Trek Enterprise, though they did not know that at the time of producing this episode.
What a bunch of fools.
They didn't know that it was going to be a 2-parter.
No, they didn't know it was going to be the last season of Enterprise. I apologize if I did not convey that.
This episode's really long.
I guess we'll just make it a 2-part.
I guess they'll just have an extra long episode one week.
That'd be the most,
they cut it in
most
half.
hilarious form of production. And you're like, maybe that's why you all got canceled. You're just actually out there just filming extra episodes.
But the last episode prior to this did end on a cliffhanger, which is why it may seem like a 3-parter. But as said before, that time of Enterprise was very serial in general. So.
Well, and so I think that's
because I watched that last episode and I was like, well, it would have helped to watch the one before that. So now was thinking I kind of want to rewatch. I haven't done this in a while where I've rewatched all of a Star Trek series, but I'm kind of wanting to rewatch Enterprise.
Enterprise is totally worth a rewatch. You can also just watch if you want, season 3. It's kind of like a big long arc. It's not quite as serialized as, say, Discovery or Picard, right? But it's got that serialized action going on.
Would you say it was more or less serialized than DS9 near the end?
More, I'd say a little bit more, although it's more like later Deep Space Nine, like season 7 Deep Space Nine, perhaps, because the stories did kind of lead one into the other, but they often had some stories that were a bit more discreet, even if they tangentially touched upon the greater quote-unquote Xindi arc. But 0 Hour, you're right. So 0 Hour is ending the Xindi arc of season 3, and then at the very end, and this is just for background if folks didn't happen to see that episode, that ends with a cliffhanger in which Captain Archer is found in a Nazi prison camp.
Yeah.
And we don't have any other information other than that.
Betty Grable.
Betty Grable.
Rita Hayworth. Veronica Lake. Betty Grable. Veronica Lake. Rita Hayworth. Veronica Betty Grable.
What an asshole.
So that season was overseen by Brandon Braga and Rick Berman. And the 4th season, those two gentlemen, or those people, handed control over to Manny Coto. And I think he recently passed away. Yes, much too young age. But Manny Coto is given a lot of credit. He worked as a writer on the
Was that
show
disrespectful of me to play that Voss clip right after you said he
No,
died?
I think it was 100% appropriate. He would have appreciated that, no doubt. I'm just going to go ahead and... Is it weird? Is it inappropriate for me to declare that you would have appreciated that?
Nah.
Oh, okay. But Manny Coto wrote a lot of the best scripts for Enterprise, so he got elevated to showrunner, basically, in the 4th season, and he's responsible for the idea of doing these like series of mini arcs. But one thing that happened was, I think he was handed this Nazi storyline and he decided, okay, I'm going to close this down real quick, right? We're not going to do like a whole season of this.
Okay, let's do it.
and he also was like, I'll use this. I'll shift where the story was intended to go, tie it into the whole temporal Cold War, because he wanted to close down that fucking temporal Cold War storyline, because the temporal Cold War storyline is some crazy ass fucked up shit on Enterprise. It's simultaneously interesting and ridiculous, because anytime you're trying to deal with like a multi-time spanning war, it's complicated. It was a sort of sophistication that I don't think that era of Paramount UPN produced Star Trek was going to accommodate.
It was confusing, right? Because they had to like kill Vosk in that time period to prevent some action he did in the past that was in the future, but then it was more in the past. They didn't really they sort of briefly touched on it, but they didn't really go into it.
Yeah.
But I will say that what I liked about this time plot of resolving it by saying like, okay, if you do this one event, everything's going to go back to normal. Normally that's problematic, because I think it's problematic because of the whole butterfly effect, whatever. It's like, okay, maybe you prevented the big catastrophe from happening, but along the way you fucked with a bunch of people's lives. So if you're going to prescribe to the butterfly effect, that'd be problematic. But this one...
So now nobody has thumbs.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely. Everyone lost their thumbs. They developed them and then they lost them. But this one actually makes sense in that, okay, it can restore back to the perfect timeline, because they they're doing all these shenanigans in the past, fucking with people's lives, but they prevented the thing that prevented the guy from doing the thing in the future and then in the past, and so it's like it never happened.
Here's the thing.
I know it doesn't make sense, but
Yeah, I was gonna say, it does not make sense. But you want it to make sense because it's a fun story.
I know.
But it is a fun story.
I'm just saying the idea of restoring the timeline to perfection by preventing other time travelings from happening makes a little more sense to me. Not makes more sense. It's less like aggravating to me than the whole like, oh, we prevented this bridge from falling, but now like a whole city knows that we're rumbling around like weirdos.
Because I was like, you watch like 2 episodes and it's like, okay, everybody's like back together. So how are they gonna fix all this stuff? And like you're still like, there's a bunch of stuff to fix, and the timeline is all screwed up. Like these aliens have been wreaking havoc.
Yeah, and it's
like, oh, all they have to do is kill this one guy off, and then that does it.
When they showed the time fixing montage, there were apparently dinosaurs. They fixed the dinosaurs, so they went back in time. The Voss
every time it was frequent when we were hanging out with Daniels, that guy Daniels, the temporal Cold War agent.
Man.
That guy is trouble.
He's always standing around some floating business, and it's like time doing. It never made.
I wonder
sense.
where they got all those those video montages. If those were just clips, like
just old Paramount film.
Yeah,
reels
right.
and stuff.
Yeah, they just threw in there.
Some stock ass
from Chakotea from Chakotea.net, where I look at the scripts.
That's your favorite website.
That's my favorite script site when they have them, which they have most of them, just not the new ones. During that time series montage, in the script notes, it says, and with an image of Archer running down the gantry before the Zindi weapon exploded, the bridge shimmers back into view.
Previous episode, 0 hour.
So that was interesting. Like that, I at that point I'd kind of zoned out all this time stuff going by, and like I totally missed it. It's like, oh yeah, there's Archer as part of the timeline that they fix. Is Archer running through?
He's got to run through that. Although I guess he didn't get blown up.
No, he didn't get blown up.
So he did get sent back into time. But he still got his clothes on. So his clothes didn't disappear, even though there's events disappearing.
Oh, right. So that's right. They fixed the timeline where he's running through the bridge, which meant he never went back in time in the first place.
So he should have been blowed up.
He should have been blowed up.
Instead of wearing his 1940s clothes on the bridge, his sort of sexy
with his hat,
poor people clothes.
And I like when Silic was wearing his like time.
He's wearing some kind of like schmo clothes.
Yeah, some schmo clothes.
General schmo clothes.
Right. There's a lot in this episode. It is a 2-parter, but it's a fairly straightforward story. But the 2 main observations I wanted to make were, first, that one cool thing about tonight's podcast is that, Dan, you and I will be able to gauge Jesse's engagement directly by how much he's playing with the stylophone.
Yeah. It's true. That's a good point.
Audience,
I never thought about that.
You can play along at home too.
You guys start talking about stuff I don't understand, and I just start going like,
It's fact. It's fact.
The other observation...
No longer a rumor, it's fact.
Fact! It's no longer a rumor, it's fact!
It almost sounds like a made-up word. Fact.
Fact.
I'm fucked. Fact.
Okay, so this relates back to that business where I was saying with Manny Koto taking over and kind of wanting to shut down the temporal Cold War timeline. I also think another thing at play was like, yes, this is the 4th season. They did get renewed. They weren't 100% sure if they were going to get renewed for a 4th season. They did.
I had a feeling.
But when they were producing this season, they also weren't sure if they were going to get renewed for a 5th season. And they were sort of desperate for ratings. And as we all know, in aftermath and the after fact and the post haste business, they did not get renewed for a 5th season, right?
Son of a bitch.
So I think one thing you see right here at the beginning is Manny Koto.
Son of a bitch.
Manny Koto, who's a big fan of Star Trek.
Manny Koto.
I think he came in here and he's like, you know what?
That's all right.
I know, like I said, we can,
Manny Koto.
Manny Koto.
It's like recognize that from.
It's like some sort of Italian cream cheese.
Wow. Hey. No. Nice.
So what we've got is Manny Koto comes in, takes over the show, and I think he was basically like, you know what? We need ratings. So what are we going to do? We're going to make a Star Trek episode that's got everything. It's got Nazis. It's got gangsters. It's got time travel. Yeah. It's got prison breaks. It's got a temporally appropriate, strong female interlocutor. It's got a
Loch Ness monster.
A shirtless captain gets treated by said female interlocutor.
Planets.
So this is everything. This is City on the Edge of Forever. This is the one with the, there's multiple ones with the Nazis. The Voyager did the Nazis. And TOS.
Piece of the action.
And then the gangsters and a piece of the action. except this one's flipped. Instead of they're fighting with the gangsters, they're friends with the gangsters. Oh my gosh. They're just like,
It's 1944.
We'll do everything. We're just going to toss everything into the bucket.
There's a Deep Space Nine where they go back to the 40s, right?
Yes, but
That's after World War.
That is
Martian.
That's a very different story.
Yeah, right.
Far Beyond the Stars. It's one of the best episodes of Star Trek ever. We'll probably not discuss it because I don't think we are the right people to be providing a thorough analysis of that episode, but it's a great one.
Okay, let's do it.
Exactly. And it was directed by Avery Brooks, that episode.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But that episode does share a similarity to this episode, which you already referenced, Jesse, I believe, when you mentioned that John Fleck, who plays Silic, he does that thing where he's like in disguise, and so he just looks like the actor.
Yeah.
And Far Beyond the Stars does that too, where they're all the actors get to, Quark and Worf and everybody. Quark!
I was thinking of it's like called Little Green Men.
Little Green Men is a different one.
Yeah, that's what I was. They go back to the 40s in that one. Too,
Oh yeah, Little Green Men is
How was I
that's a
planning to send
Roswell.
Matt to the future?
Yeah, it's a Roswell story.
But that doesn't have Nazis, and that does have a Prison Break though, and I believe I mentioned Prison Break is one of the main things.
Betty Grable.
When they go back in time, when Alicia's all like saying, "Hey, when you go back to the future, make sure things are good for me and stuff." When you go, Back to the Future, the movie, yeah, that's what you just did. That's good. I
already did that part. Yeah, I did that part.
You did that part?
I did that part.
Oh, well, how about this part?
You're going to play The Power of Love now? By
Power of Love.
Huey Lewis on the news? I'm afraid you're just too darn loud.
Oh, no. What show is that?
Can I borrow a feeling?
Can I borrow a feeling? Right.
Yes.
Millhouse
Okay.
is dead.
Billie
I had a
Holiday. All right.
I had a feeling.
15 minutes into this program, and we've gone
I had a
completely off the rails.
What was that guy's name? Kurt?
Vonnegut?
No, the Millhouse is
Oh,
dead.
Van
Kurt
Houten.
Schilling?
Kurt Van Houten. Kurt Van Houten.
Kurt Van Houten.
Kurt Van
Can
Houten.
I borrow a feeling? Borrow a feeling. Borrow a feeling.
Okay.
Borrow a feeling.
Okay. All right. Stop.
I sleep in a race car.
What?
All right.
I sleep in a bed with my wife. Sorry.
It's got the old Simpsons.
Yes, the old Simpsons. What I was saying is when Alicia was all saying like, "Hey, when you go back and fix the past and make things great again," so she was establishing what she recognized that her timeline is going to be all different. Wasn't she at all scared that no, my existence will cease to exist?
But that's the thing. Her existence it just goes back to how it was before.
She was saying
exists.
she wanted her husband home, so she didn't care that.
Wow.
So basically,
You got to beat the Japanese.
But she
first.
understood. My understanding was that she understood that if Archer was successful, all of the stuff from the Nazi invasion would be erased,
Right.
And so her husband wouldn't be sent away necessarily, or maybe he would be because it would still be the war. So
He'd
you know
still
what?
be in the Pacific.
Maybe it wouldn't be that different.
He's fighting the Japanese.
But would her timeline be changed?
Yes.
Well, Are you sure it's
Yeah.
not some alternate timeline? Because the reason I asked this is because Vosk was all trying to make a deal with Archer, being like, "Hey, Archer, if you go back, if you send us back, we'll fuck up our timeline, but we'll send you back to
He's
your
like,
good
I'll fix
timeline."
it. I know.
So
because
how does that compare?
Because it doesn't make any fucking sense. Because they paste over all of this stuff. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, they did. Right. So it's like, which is it? Is it like you fix different timelines? Is Alicia's timeline by the Vosk logic mean that Alicia's Vosk logic? Does that mean
It's just my favorite thing in the world is Vosk logic.
Does that mean that Alicia's gonna like live keep
like a new
live,
audio codec?
by Vosk's logic? Does that mean that Alicia's gonna continue to live in her own fucked up timeline, or is her timeline gonna change? But then in the Orville, actually, to bring up the Orville, they brought up this concept of like, I think it was the Orville. I don't know if Star Trek's ever done it. Whereas the people whose time was getting changed, like AKA like Alicia, e.g. Alicia.
In this case, EG, yes.
Yes. That person, Alicia's character, according to this Orville episode's logic, I'm almost done with this.
I'm not. Yeah.
I saw Patrick's looking at his watch.
Okay. Just to clarify for the home audience, Dan was justifiably thrown off there because I did look at my watch, but that's because I've got one of them, our smartwatches, and a message came through. And because I'm a modern human being, I have literally no control over myself.
Was it a message from somebody that we know?
It was a message from a mutual acquaintance, that all three of us know, but that our audiences perhaps
We
not so
don't have to
familiar with.
mention
Yeah.
It's classified.
But yes, Dan.
Okay, so by this episode's logic, Alicia would have been bummed out that they were changing
I
because
will
it meant
push
that
back on
because
the idea that this episode has any logic.
But because she would be bummed out that they're changing her timeline because she would no longer exist as she knew it because her timeline would have been changed.
It doesn't matter
Her
because
time-
she just goes on living as she
No,
used to.
I'm bringing up
Before
this.
the Nazis came.
I'm bringing up this episode of the Orville where they introduced this concept where the
When
person.
everybody was just racist.
I'm bringing up this episode of the Orville who brought up this concept that the person whose timeline is being changed is like, fuck, you're changing my timeline. Me as I know it today will cease to exist. You'll essentially be erasing me from everything.
You see, no,
you
she's
might
not
care.
erased.
And she's not erased from anything because the Nazis had only been there for a few years.
Yeah.
Well, I was just bringing up this alternate sort of viewpoint of how timeline science works.
I
don't agree.
In most other episodes of-
Timelineology.
in most other episodes of Star Trek, and while Star Trek has treated time travel in a huge number of different ways, they usually pick one way per episode, right? It's whatever works for that particular episode. This episode has picked like 10 different ways to think about time travel, and it's not unique to this episode. It's a consistent problem with the temporal Cold War conceit. And the temporal Cold War is such a cool idea. I can see why they were like, this is cool. Ever since they're watching the first episode of Enterprise when it aired back in the day on UPN in 2001, right before September 11th or after, I forget, right after, I was aggravated with the introduction of this, yes, cool sci-fi idea, but this was advertised as a prequel, and now they're already adding in this future nonsense, and it made me nervous, and I think justifiably nervous because I do think overall, the temporal Cold War timeline business is probably the weakest part. Individual episodes, I think, can be quite good, but like I think overall it was kind of like this. It weighed the series down a little bit to have this going on in the background.
Yeah, they felt like they had to include bits of it here and there to reference it. But like, so for this exchange, T'Pol says Daniel's to Malcolm, who Malcolm loved this whole. Everything he was having a great time this episode. He was loving it.
He's a history nerd.
But T'Pol says Daniel said that different factions in the temporal war are changing history throughout the timeline. Maybe this assassin was working for one of them. And then Reed says, but I thought we were here to prevent Vosk from starting the temporal war. And then Archer says chicken or the egg. And it's like they only kind of hinted at something there. They didn't really explore that idea.
It didn't go into more of that. Yeah. There was no chicken and egg situation.
Yeah, they were like, we'll kill Vosk to prevent it, but then he's like, well, but Vosk is the reason. What is it? What she says? She says, this assassin's working. I thought we were here to prevent Vosk. Yeah, I don't know. It was all fucking weird. It
was not clear.
I went around.
Chicken or the egg. Chicken or the egg.
Chicken or the egg.
Chicken or the egg, Marty. I looked online. I looked on Reddit.
Chicken and eggs.
I looked up old conversations, or tried to anyway, on
How
Trek,
about chicken
Trek
and
BBS.
waffles?
Chicken or
stuff,
the egg.
to see how people discuss this. And yeah, there was a lot of argument. Some people saying like, no, it makes sense if you think of it this way. Other people were saying, no, it doesn't make sense.
Those people are stupid.
I'll go with the producers who, if you look on Memory Alpha and a couple other sources, the producers themselves were kind of like, yeah, you know, we're just kind of getting through this. We were trying to like closing down this storyline because it had these problems. All these problems came up.
Will the chicken and the egg. Chicken and the egg.
So even the showrunners themselves were like, yeah.
I think that the fourth season, they were trying to get into what they knew was going to be some pretty meaty, tasty, delicious stuff, which was true.
It's chicken liver with grated cheddar.
This
Your favorite.
These episodes are fun. They have a lot of stuff that's worthwhile in them, but this whole time travel business is goofy. It's particularly goofy in this case. Later episodes in season 4 are largely much more coherent, I think, and they kind of they chopped off some of the dead weight here with the time travel, closed on the Xindi stuff, and then they get to move on to these little 2 or 3 episode arcs that they did with the Andorians and with the genetically modified people and another Soong and all that. Like there's some pretty cool stuff going on.
I was looking at some of those episodes on the menu, and like some of them look really interesting, like the one with Brent Spiner.
The trick is though you're in it for like 3 episodes for each of those. You can't watch just one of them because
with grated cheddar.
And we've already talked about the episode that comes after these episodes, the one where they go back to the Vulcan planet.
Yeah, Home. That was one of the few kind of standalone episodes in this series.
So the assassin killed Lenin, and because and then they said the assassin vanished, but the Lenin was so that
one could transport out, but the other ones couldn't transport.
So the assassin assassin was causing all these problems. He caused the Nazis to take power, and they were like, "Well, here to get Vosk." So I guess by killing Vosk never is in before, which is in the future, which sends the assassin back to further back time. Yeah, it's weird, man. Sorry, I'm just trying to like parse this in my head.
I can understand the inclination towards needing to
but there's nothing there to parse.
But that's the problem. It's kind of like when somebody's like, I don't understand. I was trying to explain my position to this person. And you're like, the person is acting irrationally.
Yeah.
You cannot use an irrational argument
I think,
if a person is in an irrational
Don't mix
mood.
logic and religion.
You have to apply a different strategy.
I think it's the temporal science version of technobabble where they're just saying a bunch of stuff and you're like, okay, whatever.
Sit down, be quiet, kid, be quiet.
It's like, I guess it makes sense, sure, whatever.
No, it doesn't have to make sense.
That's a good way to put it, I think.
Yeah.
Because like if that temporal agent guy hadn't been all fucked up and deformed, he would have just started slapping everybody and been like, "Listen, guys, get back in shape."
That was awesome. That fucking fucked up Daniels.
Yeah,
that was like some Star Trek. That was some Star Trek gore, right?
It was really messed up.
I agree.
It was hard to watch. It was like, I'm glad when that guy like finally died because it was like, oh my god.
Yeah, that was some classic Star Trek fucked up makeup.
Well, what's cool about that
because it did keep that fucked up
that
shit
crazy chin that was all like.
What I really liked about that was the fact that you see him, right? You see Daniels, and you're like, oh my god, Daniels looks all fucked up and weird.
My name's Dan.
And then you know what? Yes, Dan.
And then he's wearing that crazy outfit at the end.
But this guy's last name is Daniels. But
is your first name Daniel?
Dan
no,
Daniels.
it's not.
Your name
It's
is
not.
Dan Daniels.
I have a secret. I have a secret about my name.
Dan has an open secret.
I have an open secret, like
super open,
festering open,
like my pants. I walk around with open pants.
Well,
no, I don't.
Okay. Well, my point being that I'm attempting to get out.
Okay. Let's do it.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Evidence!
No, that's the wrong one. You did that on purpose because you're clever.
Okay, let's do it!
Okay. What I was saying about
Chief O'Brien.
Okay, I'm done.
What I was saying about how fucked up Daniels looked was that yes, indeed, he looked fucked up. And then it was even more fucked up when Phlox was all like, I don't know. It appears like some of him is like 800 years old, some is almost fetal. And then you imagine like the physical processes that could potentially be involved in that. And it's horrifying.
It was a nightmare.
It's way more horrifying than just how he looked.
It's a biological nightmare.
and lullaby.
I know. Nobody wants to hear a Denobian lullaby.
Well, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. That whole like part of him is old, part of him's a baby. Like conjured all this imagery in my head that was fucked up.
I think it's such a great example of combining excellent visual with excellent dialogue in
egg salad
into because the thing is one advantage that people often mention about books. Right, an advantage to books.
I like books.
I like books.
Back in my day,
that's my favorite.
TV
book.
was called books. One of the purported advantages to books, is
that's one of my favorite books.
Oh my god, we're stamped after the time loop. It's horrifying. One of those. One of the purported advantages.
Your favorite
to books.
I can't stop. I'll stop.
Is that you use your imagination to fill in the blanks, and that is why a horror book or a mystery or not like often can be more engrossing than a movie or a television show because it's in your mind, you're crafting it. It's really custom to what's going to work for you, sort of the ideal thing.
Sometimes books are scarier.
Precisely.
Especially the first time you read them.
First time I read Michael Crichton's Sphere, I was all scared.
That's a fucked up scary book?
Yeah.
There's some of those Lovecraft stories are pretty fucked up.
Lovecraft is a very good example because it's talking about like it's like talking about like, oh, it's a horror. So like if you even looked at it for half a second, your mind would melt.
Totally melt.
There's no superpowers involved. It's just so confusing that it makes you go insane.
Cyclopean
that concept in writing it can be more impactful. And And I think by and large that's true, but I think when you have really good writing and production in movies and television, they combine a little of that in there. They add some of that in there where they're like, here, you're seeing what's happening, but by clever use of dialogue, we can help conjure some other stuff going on in your brain, right? That's beyond what you're seeing. And I think this here with Daniels is a very good example of precisely that.
I agree. Earlier when I played the Chief O'Brien sound clip, Jesse
Which
said,
sound clip are you referring to?
I'm referring to the Chief O'Brien sound clip.
I was ready to say it, Chief O'Brien.
Because you've got like a lot of sound clips. I just wanted to check which
This
one you're
one?
referring to.
Chief.
Oh, it's this one.
Chief
O'Brien.
Oh, yes, that one. Yes,
Earlier when
I'm
I played
familiar.
it, Jesse said it at the exact same
I
time.
know, it was so cool
that
because
was
I was
crazy.
like, I'm just gonna say it, and then like you were just, I'm gonna hit it.
Yeah, we were syncing.
That's pretty rad.
It's a podcast miracle.
It's like when it's a podcast. It's like when you're jamming. When you have a jam session, you sync on the frequency.
Because we used to do that when we jammed back in the day.
Yeah.
Now you're verbally jamming.
Yeah.
You're just verbally jamming up on each other.
And then we fuck.
All right. Well, how about before we get to that part, let's take a quick break. And
The fucking part?
Yes, before we get to the fucking part, where we do a mutual fuck.
Ah, yes.
Which is, I think, what the kids call it these days, the young people. Before we get to that part of the podcast, and for new listeners, definitely stick around for that.
Yeah.
You're going to love it. Before we get to that, when we come back, we will have a little quiz. I have a very brief quiz. I will conduct the quiz, and Jesse and Dan, and by extension, the audience, will participate. All right. We will be right back. All right, we're back. Okay. Back in black.
Back.
I'm wearing some kind of gray. Heather gray, I think is what they call it.
Heather gray.
Heather gray.
I'm wearing lavender.
Heather gray.
Is this lavender or lilac?
I could go either way on that. It's
Lilac.
Lavender or lilac?
And the
Lilac.
lighting we have in the studio is
Lilac's a bit lighter.
is a warm
Perhaps
lighting.
bluer.
It's a warm lighting we've chosen in the studio.
So
it's hard to tell.
It's
hard to
warm. It's
distinguish
not.
I'd say
the
it's
colors.
closer to lavender.
Not too warm. I would agree with you. Sorry.
I don't know. I might play the devil's advocate and advocate
The lilac's advocates.
for the lilac side of things.
I can erase you from history.
We should we'll take a picture of Jesse's shirt and we'll put it online. We'll just take a super close-up picture of Jesse's shirt. Dan and I will each take our own picture and we'll post them both online so that way there's no bias.
No bias here.
And then on the social media you can determine whether or not Jesse's shirt is lilac or lavender.
Or hibiscus.
But
Hibiscus? Hibiscus is not is that a color too?
Well, it's a flower.
Well, I know what it is.
It's not purple,
It's,
though,
it's
is
not,
it?
it's not purple.
No, it's
So
not.
why'd you bring it up,
It's
Jesse?
a wild card.
Why are you bringing this up?
It's a diversion.
I'm gonna kill this guy.
It's a misdirect.
How about if we pulled out your tongue?
Okay.
How about I start removing your teeth with my knuckles?
I like that. I like that line. That was a good line.
How about I start removing your teeth with my knuckles?
Carmine. He was
Yes,
he was
Carmine.
in Sopranos and
He
other
was.
stuff.
He
Okay,
was like
well, this is what
Bobby
we're getting to.
Bacala.
This is what
Oh
we're getting
shit!
to.
Did I accidentally give away
No,
one
no,
of
no,
the
no,
answers?
no,
Okay.
no, because that's too obvious.
Ah,
That's too obvious.
too
There's no sort of
obvious.
quiz. I was going to introduce the quiz by noting that there's a lot of interesting guest stars in these two parts.
From contemporary TV shows.
And the quiz is about one of those.
Juan.
One of those. One of those.
Juan.
stories. Juan. So,
Look, you son of a bitch.
so first, yes, we have Steven Sciarippa, who was on The Sopranos and he played Carmine in this episode. Joe Maruzzo also was on The Sopranos. He was the guy who played Sal.
Ah, Sal.
And
Who is he on The Sopranos?
I don't know. I didn't see The Sopranos.
Oh,
What do you mean, these people?
Well, yeah.
I didn't say that.
Yes, they were on The Sopranos, and it's important to note that it's not just a happenstance that they were on The Sopranos. This was stunt casting.
Happenstance.
They were doing stunt casting because The
Yeah.
Sopranos was popular. This aired in October of 2004. Sopranos started, I think, 2002. It was already a successful show at that point, so this was very purposefully done by UPN in their effort, along with having Nazis and all this other stuff, in their effort to get ratings, get eyeballs on this show. They hired these two folks from The Sopranos, and I thought it worked very well. Both these characters were fun. We can talk about them more in a second. Another bit of stunt casting was Golden Brooks, who played Alicia Towers.
Right. That was
Travers, Alicia
another
Travers.
show at the time.
Yeah, she was on Girlfriends, which was a big UPN show, and this was Enterprise was aired on UPN, right? So it was another thing going on where they're trying to do some synergy.
What else is new?
But anyway, that was a bit of stunt casting that was going on. John Fleck played Silic again, and Silic was his main thing that he did in Star Trek, but he's done a lot of other Star Trek.
Silic.
John Fleck's all over Star Trek. He played
You silly Jerry.
He played the Romulan Tabak in The Mind's Eye, which is the one where Geordi gets brainwashed.
Yeah.
He played a Cardassian overseer in DS9's The Homecoming. He played a weird alien named Ornithar on Deep Space Nine's The Search Part 1.
Ornithar.
He played
Was he a bird?
No, interestingly enough. I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
He played a Romulan named Koval in Deep Space Nine's Inter Arma Enum Sealant Legis.
I didn't think that, not because I'm like too smart. It's because I'm not as smart as you guys, and I didn't make the connection.
You're way smarter than us.
He played a weird alien in Voyager's Alice. So basically, he's been on Deep Space Nine, Voyager, TNG, Enterprise. So John Fleck is one of those character actors who the producers went back to a lot.
And he has a band, John Fleck and the Flecktones, right? Isn't that him? Or am I thinking of someone else?
Regardless, while you look that
is
up.
it Bela Fleck? Is that what it is? Bela Lugosi and the Flecktones? Hey, it's word connection time.
Very good, Dan. You're good, you.
Free association.
We also have some other Star Trek luminaries or semi-luminaries because Tom Wright played Grath, and he is probably most famous in Star Trek for playing Twovix on Voyager.
That's right. And the guy in Seinfeld.
And he's the guy in Seinfeld.
Mr. Morgan.
He's probably more famous for Seinfeld, but
I have nothing to say to you.
In Star Trek
That's the only Grath line I have. He didn't last too long.
You should have pulled some lines from Twovix.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, that would have been better.
How about that scene in Twovix where he's all like, I want to live. We're all friends. You're going to let her kill me?
Oh, no.
You know that part?
Oh,
What
bummer.
a fucked up episode. You also, of course, have Matt Winston reprising his role as Daniels. Now, the cute thing about Matt Winston is that he's the son of Stan Winston.
Yeah.
And Stan Winston was a very famous
special effects
guy. Like one of the most famous special effects people ever.
Hollywood.
And with both Matt Winston and John Fleck, they're great actors. I actually like their characters. I like Silic. I like Daniels. It's the temporal Cold War didn't do them any favors. So, but like every time John Fleck showed up, it was like pretty awesome. I mean, it's an interesting character to interact with as long as you didn't look directly at the morphing CGI.
Who was that one regular? This is a terrible description. It's not going to be at all helpful. But he's
all right, I'm getting ready for this.
He's the regular. He does regular appearances as different characters.
Regular appearances as different characters.
He has the mustache. He's got losing.
He's losing his hair.
Yeah, he has the side hair, and he's a larger fellow, and he's in a lot of episodes of Star Trek. And he's kind of like he's like, hey, I'm a guy, and I'm just a no harm done kind of guy.
He's not in that many.
I'm a no harm done kind of guy.
I know exactly the guy you're talking about.
Right?
He usually plays like a humanoid.
Was he
not a humanoid?
Was he the guy?
He usually plays like a human type of character.
In Office Space, was he the guy with the jump to
conclusion? Yeah, that guy. Good. That's a better way of describing him than my way.
Which is why I selected it.
Yeah, good,
from my brains.
Yeah, my brain didn't work that. Yeah, he wasn't in this episode.
No, but he's been in some.
Yeah, you know what? That's an excellent point, Dan. Now, have you observed any other actors in Star Trek who are not in this episode?
Richard Reel.
Yeah, Richard Reel. He's a good one.
Iggy Pop wasn't in this episode. He played.
That's right. He was only in one episode of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah. Wouldn't have been great if he was in this episode.
Then you have Jack Gwaltney.
Or are you asking, or are you saying it wouldn't have? Were you like, wouldn't it have been great?
Wouldn't it have been great?
Yes, it would have.
Would that it were, but it weren't. As it were. So Jack Gwaltney played Jack Gwaltney played Vosk. Now Jack Gwaltney is from Richmond, which is not too far from where we are.
Virginia.
Really?
Richmond,
I used
Virginia.
to live in Richmond.
Both of you lived in Richmond.
You're damn right. At the same goddamn time.
I only was there for like 2 months. Jesse was like a legit Richmond.
You were,
resident.
we were partying.
A legit Richmondier.
Richmondium.
I lived there for a few years.
But
Never mind.
I don't trust these people.
That
I never
leaves.
have.
That leaves. There's some other people, but in terms of the important people in this plot, that leaves one other person, J. Paul Bammer.
Bammer.
No, J. Paul Bama. I know J. Paul Bomer. What? That's what it's spelled. I'm looking at my notes right here. Boehmer. Bamer. Like Hainer.
Bamer.
Like
Bamer.
John Boehner.
I think it's Bamer.
Who was the
that guy's
from Ohio politician.
B-O-E-H.
Or the Hainer mouth harps.
Harmonica.
You know the harmonicas, the mouth harps.
They make guitars too.
Hainer, right?
You are a fool.
J. Paul
Everybody
Bamer.
says Honer.
Okay,
but it's Hainer.
Let's do it.
Here's the quiz for you. This is the quiz.
Finally got there.
This is the quiz portion of this podcast program.
10 minutes later.
Yes, and the quiz is this: J. Paul Bamer. He played hold on, let me
SS agents.
Yes, he played they name in one place they call him SS agent, but they also call him he played
Spaceships.
He's the Nazi SS Untersturmführer.
He went to the University of Delaware.
Whoa.
Is he this guy?
Betty Grable.
Yes. So that's J. Paul Bamer, the SS Untersturmführer.
Bammer. Hayworth.
So my question for you is I'll give you the clue. The clue is we've seen this guy.
What is this, Jeopardy?
Yes. No. You don't have to follow the Jeopardy format.
Okay.
But you do have to provide an answer to the question.
We're just getting a normal
The
clue.
clue is that this guy has been on Star Trek before. Where might we have seen him? Where might we have seen J. Paul Bamer? Don't look it up.
I'm not looking at him.
Look at his
I'm looking
face.
at his face.
Look at his face.
Voyager and Deep Space Nine.
Okay, maybe. But,
How would I know this?
Okay, you might know this for a few reasons because to me this is interesting. First of all, it's
Better be interesting to me too.
Well, we're gonna find out, aren't we?
He's in the Thomas Crown affair.
You reserve the. I told you not to look it up.
I already looked it up before you told me not
Well,
to look
stop
it up.
looking at it. So okay,
That's how I knew it was
I got,
Dan, it's
I
all
got the
about-
looks.
Yes. So
It's classified.
let's go through what else we've seen him in Star Trek.
Does he put on alien makeup?
He does.
There's no way I'm going to be able to.
Yes. When you hear, now I was, I had reserved on your behalf the right to not be impressed. But now that you've said that, I guarantee
Okay.
you'll be impressed.
Garen fucking T.
Garen fucking T. So
J. Paul Bamer.
he was on Voyager. Some of these, there's no reason for you to expect to necessarily know this, right? He was on Voyager in the episode 1 as a Borg drone. It's like where they find a Borg drone.
He looks like a Borg, yeah.
So it's like, okay, all right, he's got a Borg makeup, and who knows, maybe you haven't seen that episode in a long time, maybe you haven't seen it, I don't know, whatever. Okay, all right.
They're kind of like Nazis.
Don't worry about
Our
that.
Borg are kind of like Nazis.
Don't worry about that.
Sorta.
He was also in Deep Space Nine, tacking into the wind as the Cardassian named Vornar.
I knew he was a Cardassian. I should have said that.
I'm a diehard Deep Space Nine person. I barely remember that character.
Yeah, I don't remember him. I was just wanting to say Cardassian.
You
'Cause I was thinking about Iggy Pop.
remember certain Cardassians.
Yeah, and he's a
it's
good
not that
Cardassian,
guy.
but he's not a big role, right? He's not a super big deal.
You remember like 2 Cardassians.
Right? All right. Now here's where it gets a little bit there's 2 levels of interestingness to this particular situation. The audience at home is already bored because they've looked it up and they're like, oh, I know where he's going. I know where this Patrick fella's
As soon
going.
as you said don't look it up, they looked it up.
It's because this
That's
audience is a
what the
naughty
kids
audience.
do nowadays.
Naughty audience looking on their
I'll blow your ugly head off.
You told me not to do it.
on their devices. So
Find it.
where you might recognize him, level 1,
Maybe you might.
layer 1.
Oh boy.
You may recognize him from this very series, Enterprise, from an episode we covered a while back, a little episode called Carbon Creek,
Oh,
in which he plays the I Love Lucy loving Mestrel. He's like the main Vulcan dude. He's the guy who ends up wanting
He's
to,
that guy.
Yeah, he's that guy.
He's that guy. Huh.
That's a good episode of the podcast, by the way.
I didn't realize.
It's a good episode of Enterprise, and it's a good episode of the podcast. I didn't look up which number of the podcast it was. It was a while back.
That was a good one.
And he was all into.
That was a good podcast.
He was all into watching I Love Lucy.
I
suppose I would have done the same.
we have a lot of good episodes of this podcast.
I know.
We're amazing.
I know. We really
In
fucking
case
are.
in case you didn't know, you should People at home.
Yeah, check him out.
Listen to the episode.
Don't listen to all of them, but
Not,
but like most of them.
But
most of them are.
There are several, and you can take your pick.
There's a few
That could change very.
clunkers in here.
Oh
and there.
yeah, absolutely.
But we're not going to tell you which ones.
Nah,
you can discover that on your.
That's on you. That's on you.
But yes, so he played Mestral, and that's pretty interesting, right? Wouldn't you say that's fairly interesting? Maybe not the most interesting, but it's kind of cool, right, Dan?
It's cool for sure. I wouldn't say it's interesting, like, but it's more like, oh, cool.
How about this? How about
It's
this?
more like, oh, cool.
I think you sound to me like
But
you're
it wasn't
ready.
like a huh.
You're ready for level 2, I think. That's what
Okay.
I'm getting. I think you're ready for level 2 of interestingness.
Incredible.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. Which is, we're going to go back.
Uh-oh.
We're going to go back to Voyager. I know we mentioned he was on Voyager, the episode 1, playing a Borg drone, but we're going to go back to a different episode. Nay. 2 episodes, a two-parter. Voyager's two-parter, The Killing Game, parts 1 and 2. Which
I'm gonna kill this guy.
The Killing Game we focused on it was also a Nazi episode. It had a bunch of it was a 2-part Nazi episode.
That guy's in the Nazi act.
And in that one he played
Nazi Martians.
he played an SS Hauptsturmführer. So
Whoa.
he got
Holy fuck.
He got demoted in this one.
See, that's more like a huh.
But
That
what's
is
funny
more-
is when you see the pictures of him playing those characters, he's just
That's,
he's just a guy wearing an SS uniform.
That's a colonel.
Ah.
That's a colonel.
I don't know. I don't know
Lieutenant
the
colonel.
equivalence.
So,
Yeah,
so I would say level 1 was like cool. Level 2 was like huh, and then level 3 is like huh.
Nazis in the
I don't
audience.
recall
Set it
this.
straight.
I don't, yes, that's right, Jesse. Nazis. If you didn't catch that, Dan, Jesse just implored the Nazis in the audience to let us know what the equivalents
We
were.
don't know the ranks exactly.
There are. I sadly there are a few Nazis in the audience.
I don't know. I'm just saying.
You notice it from the comments on YouTube when they're like, "What is this woke bullshit?"
I'm not going to say anything to that, but
These guys are talking nice about ladies.
If you know the lore,
minorities.
let us know.
Level 3 was like huh.
There was no level 3. I didn't advertise.
You
level
did.
3.
You said the level.
said level
the
1
level.
and level
no,
2.
the level 2 was that he was an SS guy. The level 3 is that the picture was the same. He was wearing the same uniform.
I think that's a sub point under level 2.
I disagree.
Okay.
What
well,
about
you
those
can categorize it
alien
however you
dudes?
want.
They had like a face full of noses.
What was that? They
had
were
noses all the fucking.
What is he talking about? A face full of. What are you
He's
talking
talking
about?
Those Nazi aliens. They
He's
had
talking
like
about the Nakul.
they
Was
had
that
like
their name?
these
The
spikes
Nakul?
on their faces.
I think they were called the Nakul.
Is that what they were?
I don't know.
They had
didn't
cool
believe
eyes,
in Nazi
but their
Martians,
faces
you know.
were crazy.
Wasn't it called the Nakul?
Martians?
Martian? We're over 200 years in the past. We are 200 years in the past.
He says it so matter of fact. Well, one final little bit of trivia
He's the most pissed off
about Jay
back
about
in
Jay
time.
Bomer was he was born in Dayton, Ohio.
Oh,
that's where my daddy
that's where
grew
your
up.
dad's
My
from.
daddy grew up.
That's where Daytona
That's your
is.
ancestral homeland.
He grew up in Kettering, but they all say they're from Dayton.
Daytona-
It's like we say we're from DC. We're not from DC.
Daytona is in Dayton.
We're from Northern Virginia.
Daytona is in Dayton.
Daytona's in
the
Florida.
Daytona 500 is in Dayton. So they
Florida.
call it the Daytona.
Dan, we have an international audience, and some people might interpret what you're saying now as being making fun of them somehow. That they might not be familiar with the geography of the country.
I don't think anyone thinks that.
I think some people might be like, he's fucking with us.
I think most people are going to say that because
No, they might think I'm making fun of Dayton, but not the people who are not from the U.S. I'm not making fun of them. But Patrick assumes that I am because I'm like trying to pull a fast one on them, right? And so the next time they go to Dayton, they'll be like, "Is this where Daytona 500 is?" And people are like, "Oh, Dan told you that, didn't he?"
Yeah, you have to put up signs. Yeah, don't fuck around with that Daytona 500 in Florida. Though
oh no,
Jesse and I, we went down with the families to Key West one year. Did not know
you can't get a hotel.
Did not know Daytona 500 was happening.
motel.
We had our hotel.
You didn't know that the Daytona 500 was a busy
No, we didn't know it was happening.
We didn't. We're dumb.
We had our hotel in Key West was booked. We were good there. It was on the 1,300 mile drive. We were unable to get a hotel anywhere in Florida
From,
because
like,
everything was booked up in
St.
Florida.
Augustine down.
Yeah. So yes, Dayton, Ohio. J. Paul Boehmer. He was in a bunch of. You might be interested, Dan.
Your favorite.
He did a lot of voice work in Star Trek video games.
Ah.
Yeah.
That was
after I looked it up.
Right on.
I
Yeah.
learned that.
And so we got to review some more of those video games, and we'll have to do some like cool video game stuff.
Star
There's a lot
Trek
of
Bridge Commander.
There's a lot of good Star
Trek
video game
Klingon
action.
Academy. He's in the Thomas Crown Affair.
which is a great movie.
He's a graduate of the University of Delaware.
Dan is unimpressed.
And yeah,
I'm looking up Star Trek games.
And
Sorry.
I'm going to stop talking. And what do you have to say?
I think it's Bridge Commanders. I have Bridge Commander, but also
It sounds cool.
Yeah, but then there's also a VR one that I haven't played on the PlayStation, that where you like take control of like you're one of the cruisemen.
The cruiseman.
Cruiseman.
Are you cruising?
Are you cruising?
And then
for
of
a
course
bruising?
there's Star Trek.
Cruising for. You're always cruising for a bruise.
I know
you.
There's Star Trek Resurgence, which Tarek so wonderfully gave me, and which I'm going to be playing soon. Like I said, I have to fit it in between Tears of the Kingdom and Starfield. So
Starfield, what's that?
Our lives are miserable.
Some huge game that's going to take forever to play.
Oh Lord.
Okay, we discussed earlier about how the time travel stuff is, you have to kind of overlook it. And even the writers are kind of telling us, they're just pushing it through and saying like, don't pay attention to it, just enjoy the story. And I think part of what helps that is that they have all these characters and they're very well portrayed and everyone's having a good time playing these roles. And then they also have a lot of just really memorable imagery, like dudes getting shot in the head in the middle of the street.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Like the Daniels grossness thing.
Yeah, the two most violent scenes were probably that dude getting shot,
just summarily executed.
Yeah, and then there's another scene where Carmine shoots some dude in the neck.
Yes.
Like some
and
he's like, and the guy
gets shot, right?
and then the guy grabs his neck like, oh,
yeah, and gurgles.
Yeah, and Twovix, yeah, he gets fucked up. I can't remember if Twovix bled or not.
And
he gets shot in the hand first.
Gets blasted.
Yeah, that's right.
Silic gets blasted.
Yeah, he's all.
There was some blood there.
But then you also have the Nazi White House, which is like,
yeah.
Now it's kind of comical because on the one hand, like the CGI and the framing,
it's like a CGI.
It
looks like the house from the Fresh Prince or Benson.
And the CGI tank is weird, and it's not even the whole White House, right? That's the other thing. It's kind of like.
It's like part of it.
It's missing some buildings around. Like we
and
live
the tank
here.
looks like a cartoon.
Yeah, I walk by the White House on a very regular basis, and it's like it's just funny when it's so wrong. But at the same time, it carries more weight nowadays to see a White House covered in swastikas because you're like, oh, that's not as far-fetched.
Yeah.
We actually had a Nazi.
Bummer.
It was back in 2004.
Bummer.
So there was that weird little twinge
2016.
when you see that image. It makes it a little extra power to that image.
So some of the effects, like the CGI, pretty much all the CGI, I can't tell if it was just a relic of its, or just a artifact of its era, or if they were just not great CGI even for its era. But like it was still entertaining.
It's
It was TV.
Yeah.
It was UPN.
I mean, let's see. There's the P-51 battle. I guess that was fine.
Was this when they started filming the show in digital?
Yes, fourth season was the first season that Star Trek was
and that's
filmed
when
digitally.
other shows started doing digital too, like Curb Your Enthusiasm.
So the first 3 seasons were on film.
There was
stock.
another one of the scary parts, which was CGI, was the scary backwards crawling ceiling silic guy,
Yes.
monster, where it couldn't figure out which way was forward. That was fucked up, but that was kind of actually cool CGI.
I know one of my cool CGI things was I thought the Enterprise flying into the sunset.
That's what I was going to mention. That was really good.
It was a
that
great
was
shot,
awesome.
and it was a unique shot. You don't really see quite a shot
that
like
was
that
super cool
elsewhere in Star Trek.
That was playing to the strengths of CGI.
The shuttlecraft CGI looked like.
Because Star Trek Enterprise was not known to be particularly groundbreaking in terms of framing and cinematography. They had a few good things to highlight.
It's kind of like in Voyager when they went and visited Sarah Silverman on Earth.
Yes,
there
Future's End, another 2-parter, but that one doesn't have any Nazis.
But that one had the Voyager flying through the sky
on like a VHS
and it looked really good because it played to the strengths of the time. Speaking of like the Silic monster, both
Silic monster, he's a man. He's a person.
When both there was
he has a soul.
Both Archer.
I don't know.
Both
Do aliens have souls?
No.
We got to call up the Pope.
We're all human here.
Both Archer and Trip Tucker III were had to like wrestle with the Silic guy.
Captain.
As he like
Captain, this guy's real squirrely.
As he like squirted away. I thought that Trip Tucker III.
Captain, this guy's like wrestling a pig.
I thought Trip Tucker III did
wrestling a pig in Pensacola.
I thought Trip Tucker III did a better job of like wrangling with Silic than Archer. You could see Trip Tucker's arm sort of squishing with it, but like
Trip
Archer,
Tucker's been in a few times. Like Archer's used to punching people in the face. Trip is used to getting down in the mud.
Well, I'm just saying
Trip has done some stick fighting.
He was locked up in a hallway.
Okay. I should have specified Connor Trenier versus Scott Bakula because actually acting the part out, Connor Trenier did a good job of like pretending there was something there, whereas Archer just kind of like gripped his arm statically. Although I would say that the shot with Archer was a harder shot probably to pull off.
That's a good joke. The shot with Archer.
Oh yeah, that's a good joke.
It's an archery joke.
Yeah, it is. So that's very funny. That's a good.
What do you think about this show? I don't know.
It's a bullseye.
It's a bit archery.
So
this show's a bit archery for my taste.
So I thought that it was a tricky scene.
It needs to be more musketry.
No, it needs to be more trippy. I like a trippy episode of Enterprise.
I thought the
scene... a little too archery? I don't know. Sorry. I couldn't help it because it's fun.
I thought the scene where Silik was squishing away from Archer was probably harder to do, but like his arm was like kind of, I don't know, it was kind of a goofy scene. I'm just going through all the CGI scenes.
No, I agree. This is good. Hey, how about this? Let's take a quick break and then continue the list of CGI.
Okay.
I need a quick one.
And then close things up. All right, we'll take a quick break and we will be right back.
Are we back?
All right, we're back. We are now. We weren't sure, but you made it. You confirmed it, Dan. All right, CGI. Continuing down the list of both good and bad CGI.
So there was the historic footage of Germany and the U.S., which, how would you compare that with what was done in Forrest Gump? Because remember Forrest Gump, they did all this stuff where they put the Forrest Gump in place.
It's just not quite the same because most of it is just decontextualized existing footage where they just using dialogue, just say it something different.
You're right.
Right. But there were a few where they added some stuff in, and I thought that for the part 2 opener, it was a fairly powerful opener because they didn't do anything else. It was just the Hitler propaganda reel. And I think where it hits you is you're like, oh, I'm not seeing any other part. The teaser is solely this propaganda reel. So that positions you as an audience into an uncomfortable place. And I thought it was pretty well done because it was kind of freaky to the concept of the Germans, of the Nazis taking over this section of the Northeast, which is why that whole map scene, the Risk style, the Axis and Allies.
Oh yeah,
style
I want to go to that in a second. I want to go to that in a second.
All right, but CGI.
But
another special effects.
Speaking of the opening, I took a shot because I thought it was kind of jarring, the opening going into the intro. This is the
2 great nations marching side by side toward a bold future.
It's been a long, long
This is the one with the extra jazzy beat.
Yeah, I like it better. I just thought that was kind of
like that one's part of the propaganda.
Yeah, I know. It was a jarring transition. It was. One might even say it was anachronistic or something.
Yes, anachronistic is good, but I agree, Jesse. It does kind of feel like it's like, everything's Hitler's groovy.
Right.
It's been a long It's too bad they didn't do what they did later in this season with the In a Mirror Darkly episodes where they actually changed the intro to mirror universe style. It would have been interesting to have like the Nazi version of a Star Trek intro. Obviously, they were limited with budget and or creativity, but can you imagine that? If you're doing a Nazi episode, do one where there's an alternate timeline where the Nazis won or at least had more victories than before, then that would be something I'd like to see.
Like some kind of like marching music or something.
So the next CGI, there's that awesome shot of the Nazi plasma cannon. That's all like so that was really cheesy. Like but it was
cheesy.
Awesome.
It was also kind of sexual.
Yeah, right. and then they shot back.
I mean, I don't know. To me, it seems sexual.
And then back then they had phase cannons, which is what they shot back with, but they also had photonic torpedoes, which is different than photon torpedoes. We've had this discussion between photonic torpedoes and photon torpedoes. I can't remember how it goes.
It's silly.
It's like when you say like acoustic.
Photonic. It's like photonish. It's not like a photon torpedo, but it's photonish.
It's so romantic.
It's photonic.
There was the Stuka battle.
Yeah, the Stuka fighters, and with plasma cannons, that was kind of badass. Even though the CGI maybe wasn't wonderful, the concept of these German Nazi fighters, but with future plasma cannons on them, was both funny and sort of terrifying.
And there was the part where Reed was talking, Malcolm was talking to Paul. He was like German. He was like German dive bombers, Stukas, nothing too much to worry about.
7.65 millimeter cannons.
However, they were fitted with sirens to frighten the enemy during attack. They fire 7.9 millimeter rounds.
Right.
And so Paul's like,
she was getting bored.
Yeah, she was like, this is not the point. Right. But like, this is an example of Malcolm. He was really loving all this historical shit. And so, for a second, I was like, why did they even include that scene? But then I figured it out. It's because they Stuka cannons fired lasers, and they wanted the audience to know it's like, this is what they're supposed to have.
This is what they're supposed to have.
This is what they're supposed to have.
Now they have this.
Someone's got a case of the Sposdas. So yeah,
Indeed
that
they
was
do.
cool. The Stuka battle, yeah, that was fun. I mean, it was fun. It was fun. I liked it. I also
Wait,
liked.
did you think it was fun?
I did. The Nazi plasma cannon, which was weird and goofy. I also liked. Like, it was
Where it, like
cool.
all rose up and was like, boom.
Yeah, it was sexual. So Vosk going all wazzy while he time warps and
Are you
blows up
talking
at the same time.
Australian now? Are you using Australian slangisms?
Vosk,
where you put an O and a Z?
can you wait till
Buzzy and buzzy?
I can finish the sentence and then you can interject with that comment.
No.
You can wait till I finish the sentence.
All right.
You can wait till I finish the sentence and then interject.
But
with
I would
that.
have forgotten by that point.
Okay, I have to take into account your medical needs. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
precisely.
When Voss was going crazy, when he was going to blow up and time warp at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Let's do the time warp
that's when
again.
it was that scene. Yeah, that was
It
weird.
was all stretching around.
That was a weird scene. That was kind of an odd choice. That looked really cheesy, but also kind of awesome. I don't know. There was something really out of place about that to me, I thought, if you were to ask.
If, for Sooth, an example.
It makes more sense for
Maybe.
the Nazis to build some kind of intercontinental missile instead of a plasma cannon, because they're all into like the rockets. They were launching all those rockets at the British.
These were aliens.
Well, yes, that's
It's
the
like
aliens coming.
alien weapons. I just like Jesse would be the one being like, nah, I don't think we need these futuristic plasma cannons. Let's just stick to the V2 rocket. Hey, we'll make a new one. We'll call it the V3.
Well, they had that.
Everyone will go wild for it.
They'll go wild for it.
It's crazy.
It'll be the sensation.
Well, we already talked about the timeline montage. That was kind of goofy. Oh yeah, and then at the end there was the shots of, as T'Pol says, dozens of vessels coming in. I counted there are exactly 24 vessels coming in.
So
exactly,
technically
24.
There were
Correct.
some neat looking vessels.
She was technically
They
correct.
had some Vulcan
Some
ships in there.
Vulcans, some Federations.
And Dorian-ish ships.
Yeah,
There was
some
one
kind
that
of
looked
things.
like it was from the Phantom Menace or something. It was like that circle one. There was one that was
That
a
was a-
circle
that
one.
was
The Vulcan
Vulcan.
ships are all the circular.
Yeah.
Did that?
It looked like the Naboo.
So who came? Yeah, who came up with that? The Naboo thing first. I wonder. If it
I
was-
think was it
Probably Star Trek.
I think it's Star Trek that came up with that, but I don't know. But I think so. I think it goes way back.
More like
the Vulcan stuff is kind of old. Yeah.
more like I poo. Oh, the map was cool.
The map, the Axis and Allies map,
Like
the whole idea again
in the 40s,
occupying the White House.
that was the population of America was like in the Northeast and the Midwest. Like there wasn't as much on the West Coast like there is today, right? Isn't that right?
I
Pretty much?
think to a certain degree,
To a certain
demographically,
degree,
I think you were not too
like
far
that.
off.
That would be a big deal to just kind of roll in there and take that shit out.
Yeah, although presumably a lot of people,
And-
the army and other people, retreated back into the
but you
across the Mississippi.
It
or
also
something.
makes sense that they would have been hung up like right there at the mountains,
Yeah.
like in Ohio and Kentucky.
Virginia.
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 That's where
Eastern Pennsylvania and Southern Virginia.
He said Pennsylvania.
Southern Virginia.
Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania. See?
Yeah.
Eastern Pennsylvania and Southern Virginia.
And that goes. You had a whole theory about English people and how they talk.
I don't think it's a theory. I think it's just how
Is
it
that
is.
how it goes? That received chicks?
with the whole adding an R to things.
It's if the end of a word is a vowel and the beginning of the next word is a vowel, they put an R between them.
I think
Banana.
Yeah, precisely.
You only say banana if you
Jamaica.
if the next word started with a vowel.
Jamaica.
If you said banana
vaudeville.
If you said if you said banana carrot, you just say banana carrot. But if you said banana apple, you'd say banana or apple. Banana apple.
Banana carrot?
Banana.
Do you listen to yourself when you talk? What is this?
Banana carrot, banana apple.
What is this banana carrot?
Bananarama.
Bananarama.
You
yes.
only add an
Now
R to
I know.
you only add an R to a consonant if there's already an R there. Bananarama. I cut some time out. Doesn't this sound like a beat?
They mention recent battles in Virginia and Ohio.
Doesn't that sound like a fun beat?
They mention recent battles in Virginia and Ohio. They mention recent battles in Virginia and Ohio. They mention recent battles in Virginia and Ohio. They mention recent battles in Virginia and Ohio.
So there's been
I think you should do something with that.
Well, yes, Jesse. Not only do I agree that he should do something with it, I also think you keep making these examples that sound great, and you're like, I should do this, and they don't do it.
I know that's my
You gotta play them all together.
I'm always like, wouldn't it be great if I should do this, and then I just don't do it.
Well, write in to
You
feedback.
have like several albums worth of material.
Feedback at
just brewing over
itsgotstartrek.com
With grated
the subject
cheddar.
line. The subject line should just be Dan should do it.
That Dan should do it. I marked this one as beat for
Dan can.
I marked this as beat.
It's chicken liver with grated cheddar.
That's kind of like a beat.
Chicken liver with grated
It's
cheddar.
chicken liver with grated cheddar.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's chicken liver with grated cheddar. With grated cheddar. With grated cheddar. With grated cheddar.
Flox. Oh, Flox, you old floxy bastard, you.
So I was looking at that map, and
There wasn't a lot of, by the way, there wasn't a lot of grated cheddar in there. I could see why Porthos was pissed off.
It was a few slivers.
It was a few slivers, and honestly, chicken liver, come on. I don't know. I mean, maybe Porthos likes it.
Maybe
More
if you're
power
a
to
cat.
you.
Well,
come on,
it was-
chicken liver.
That's cat food.
Well, it was confusing because he said chicken liver is your favorite. Then he's like, you need a steak. Well, it's like, well, if chicken liver is his favorite, why would a steak be any better?
Yeah.
But it's because he was lying. Because, like you said, who wants chicken liver? He knew that
And
steak
who
would have been good.
advertises
I'd rather have a steak,
shredded cheddar when there's like 3 measly little strips of little? Do you see that little 3 little shreds?
Bullshit. Maybe it
Because-
upset Porthos' stomach.
I think it's one of those deals where Phlox was preparing it, but he was like eating it as he was preparing it, and he just ate most of the cheese up.
Yeah,
He
probably.
slurped it up through his goofy ass.
Oh, man.
Not necessarily.
Phlox mouth. his
Sad Porthos.
denobulid mouth.
Sad Porthos when
Sad Porthos is sad,
It's
yeah.
bummed me out. Sad Porthos.
If it
Porthos
makes
is
you
sad.
if
Yeah.
it makes you feel any better, that dog actor is long since dead. by the way.
Okay. He's not sad anymore.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
It's not unusual for the thought of dead dogs to make people just feel much better about their lives.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Dead dog.
So the map. I was looking at this map.
Yeah, man.
So the
Very
map,
cool map.
has Nazis owning all of the Northeast U.S. There's
Yeah.
border battles in South Carolina, in North Carolina, in Ohio.
Yeah.
They
Kentucky.
have the exact border between Kentucky and West Virginia. They have that exact border. It looks
and
like.
Virginia.
But then the northeast bit of Tennessee, there's a battle, and the tip of Virginia's little west now.
Just the tip.
A little wiggly bit at the
Wiggly
end.
bit is, but they had the exact border of West Virginia. So, what they had in Virginia, they had 1 Nazi and 2 U.S. Signs
man.
fighting for Virginia. In South Carolina, they had 2 Nazis against 1 U.S.
How many of the native population was on the Nazis?
I don't know. You mean native U.S. was on the Nazi side?
Yeah, like
Shit, I didn't even think about that. That's fucked up.
I think the best part is
said that. That's fine.
when this it's a good point, because when this aired in 2004, it was reasonable not to even consider that. You're like, oh yeah, everyone's going to try to fight the Nazis, or at least lay low.
Right.
Now we're like,
was
oh fuck,
that was back then.
30% of the people are going to be like, fuck yeah.
Oh man,
Didn't you see that video of Hitler? That film of Hitler coming to New York? He's great.
bummer, dude. There was North Carolina. There looked like North Carolina. There looked like there was 1 U.S. in just going to waltz right in there with no opposition. Because in North Carolina, you see, no one was defending North Carolina. The
Nobody
Nazis
ever
were.
does.
No. Damn. And there were 2 Nazis just sitting doing nothing. There was one in southeast North Carolina, actually, which was near guarding the water, I guess. But like that 1 Nazi could have moved over to the west. And then there was another Nazi
Guarding the
but then
water.
Then there was some other Nazi just sitting at the border of Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey. Oh, and then there was also
Are you talking about streets in D.C.?
And then there was also one in New Hampshire. There was one in New Hampshire.
New Hampshire?
It was like an awkward game of Axis and Allies.
Yeah, I wonder how many units each thing
You
represented.
said unit. Hey, one thing that I thought was great about this episode
Is that Voss can make a plague that targets non-Aryans only somehow?
that was not the part I thought
That was
great.
weird. That was weird.
That was scary, but that's not
But
what I
how
thought
is
was
that
great.
possible? How is it possible?
They've been talking
It's
about
not,
that for years.
But it's also the writers, maybe the writers are not familiar in 2004. As progressive as they may or may not have been, they may not have been familiar
Doesn't that imply
with the social
by-
construction of race.
By saying like targets non-Aryans, doesn't that imply that the Aryans are actually like?
It
Like a
does,
real
It
thing,
does in fact
right?
imply that, and it
Yeah.
is wrong.
Okay.
And there's that great.
Yeah,
I think
exactly. So
It's like saying these imaginary concept people.
There's a few,
and so that's why I was saying this is shady, not just, of course, that Voss can do it, but the fact that the writers sort of wrote that in there
well,
was weird.
You know, what are you gonna do? Yeah. It was people are assholes.
It was a bad time, man.
But also, there's
You said butthole.
There's more.
Who's that?
Patrick.
There's more.
Damn right.
There's more than one way to skin a butthole. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's
Virginia.
there are multiple science fiction tales that are variations on the idea of a group deciding to make either a virus or robots. I think there was an Outer Limits where they did it with robots, where they were like, kill all the undesirable people. But the problem is that the criteria for undesirable people, they were made up, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just racism. And so the robots or the disease ended up killing everybody. Because obviously you can't parse people out like that, especially not using socially constructed non-biological criteria such as race or ethnicity, etc.
Yeah.
But that's not what I was getting at. What I was getting at.
What do you mean, these people?
What I was getting at.
What do you mean?
Oh, by the way,
people?
another thing that was fucked up was like how those German guards who were like, "Why are you walking with this woman? Do you like?" There was that was some proper racism, and I like when they don't shy away from the like those German guards. That was like real. And the thing that's extra fucked up is those are Germans, but she could have heard the same thing from
those
just regular. Yeah, exactly. Maybe.
Yeah, Sal was saying. I think the reason Sal died is because, in like plot wise, the reason they allowed him to die is because he was saying some shady shit.
He was also not great necessarily, but
you know, Carmine was probably just as fucked up as Sal, but he never showed it to be true. Maybe Carmine was really good at heart. I don't know, but like he was allowed. They made him out to be noble, I guess, but I don't know. In a way,
noble gangsters.
Noble gangsters. Hey, remember the Rocketeer when that guy?
I do. I saw that recently. I was sad. It wasn't as good as I remember.
When that gangster was like, I may not like
Billy Campbell.
He goes like, I may not make an honest buck, but like I love America. It was a weird line to say. Like,
it's a weird movie. I remember the Rocketeer fondly as a child. I watched it recently. It's worth watching. It's not as good as
a lot of the gangster dudes in World War II like participated in World War II on the American side.
Yeah, for the not fucked up side.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was historical reason that the Rocketeer and this both had gangsters fighting.
And particularly, this takes place in Brooklyn. There was a large mafia presence. All your distractions aside, you're very very well placed and excellently constructed distractions aside, the very minor point that is now way blown out of proportion that I was trying to make was a fondness I have for this episode is in the scene you're talking about where that Nazi general guy, he's explaining that they've overextended themselves, which is great.
Crawl. I think it's Crawl.
They did not present
No,
this
that's General. That's General. You're talking about the alien guy. You're talking about the General, the actual
German Nazi guy.
Yeah.
Who gets shot by Voss later.
The actual German Nazi.
And again, a great actor. I think his name is like John Neame or something like that. Great actor. He's really good at playing this horrible Nazi person. But I think it was really helpful to the story to not portray the Nazis as some sort of superhuman steamrolling over the world. I like the idea of them having this brief advantage because of the elimination of Lenin. So it removed an obstacle for the Nazis in the future.
It was Christopher Neame.
So it's Christopher Neame, yeah. So that was cool. I liked that they didn't make them into some unstoppable superpower. They're having problems. The Nazis can't. Their lines are too long. They've gone too far.
They got these aliens.
They should have gotten the speedy pass if the lines were too long. Then they get to jump to the front of the line.
Yeah, I think it's called different things at different amusement parks.
I think speedy pass implies what I'm talking about. Though.
I think most
sounds
people,
like an asshole pass.
It is. I think most people will get it. But I did want to avoid the letters that we inevitably get when
all those letters.
Actually, at King's Dominion it's this, but at Disney World it's this.
Nobody knows what King's Dominion is outside of Virginia.
Lots of people know what King's Dominion is.
Maybe in like other parts of the
They know
East
about
Coast.
like King's Island.
Yeah,
they
other
know
parts
about
of the East
like
Coast, Maryland.
Cedar Park. All the
Our
Cedar
international
Park's
audience will not know
what
King's
does Maryland
Dominion
have? They got like Six Flags.
They got
King's
They used to
Dominion's better
have.
than
They used
Six
to have
Flags.
Wild World, which
that's Six Flags.
Well, I know it became Adventure World, which became Six Flags.
Yeah.
But then Six Flags, no, they bought Wild World. Wild World was its own thing before Six Flags.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, this is not important.
But it's
I don't know
funny.
what you're trying to say.
I'm trying to say, you're saying the Wild World is Six Flags. I'm saying it's not Six Flags.
Well,
it was just bought by
it
Six
is
Flags.
now.
The corporate
Yeah, but I'm
ownership-
saying like Wild World was central.
It was different.
Six Flags is a franchise. Wild World was just its own thing.
Yeah.
That's
I think
what I'm saying.
What we
Yeah,
can
it was
stipulate,
cool.
We can,
Wild World was
we can
cool.
Yeah, I was into
stipulate
Wild World.
for the
Yeah,
purposes
man.
of this particular
Water
conversation.
slide.
I had heat stroke there.
We can stipulate
That rules.
that the history of corporate ownership of various local amusement parks is interesting, but perhaps a topic for another podcast. It's got amusement parks.
Absolutely.
That would be a great.
That would be a
great
good one.
podcast.
Yeah.
We could have all sorts of guests on, talk about roly coasters,
Rollies.
roly coasters.
Roly polies.
How about if we pulled out your tongue?
Loch
yes,
Ness monster.
I thought it was good because first of all, I'm never comfortable when Nazis are portrayed as all powerful because it's not good. That's the point they were trying to make. They were saying was all powerful. So when you make them an all powerful enemy, that's a problem. I like showing them in a situation where they've had some victories that cause all this fucked up shit that we're seeing, but at the same time, it's not like there's no hope or whatever. We're hearing throughout both of these episodes these hints of there's this rebellion basically. It's like the Star Wars rebellion except with real human beings. Real human beings.
That general was kind of like getting a little too big for his puffy German pants britches. Like,
What you mean? Well, he did outrank Vosk.
yeah, but like as Voss said.
I can erase you from history.
So the general's all like, you better shape up or ship out.
From a practical perspective,
yeah.
I agree.
And in the
if
end-
I'm that general, I'm like, what the fuck have I gotten myself involved with? These
Yeah.
lizard face people.
And so-
Would you say, Jesse, the people with all the noses on their
They
face?
got a bunch of noses.
Yeah.
On them.
So the general's trying to bargain with Vosk and saying, "Oh, this is how it is." But like Vosk in the end is fine.
This is how we do it.
And the general is just like pesky by the end, and Vosk was just like, "Okay, fuck off," and he just kills him. So like the general had no leverage, but he thought he did.
Maybe, but he also was in a bad position because they were being attacked. There was an American offensive that, by all accounts, was perhaps being fairly successful. And he was quite desperate to have that.
It's hard to fight a
special
war
weapons.
in the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah.
Vosk was doing a bit of bluffing though, because when he said,
I can erase you from history.
that was in the point in time where he like was desperate to get this conduit built, and
that's
so
right.
he needed the general.
He was bluffing a bit,
but he
that's
played
right.
his cards better because then he found another route
That's
with
right.
the Silic and all that
He
stuff.
was playing all sorts of cards. What are some Star Trek card games? There's the fake one, Fizbin. What are some real ones?
There's probably some internet ones.
There's
Dabo's not a card game. Is it?
no.
Oh, you're talking about in
Dabo's
universe.
more like Dabo's more like
Dabo's pool.
No, Domjot is pool.
Oh, Tomjot's
what
Domjot.
Dabo is like
roulette.
is like roulette.
Yeah.
What kind of poker are they playing in TNG?
That's just they're playing like 5 cards.
They're playing
Five card-
3D
okay.
poker.
No,
No.
Dan, you're doing that thing again.
Oh,
You're just
man.
making stuff up.
Aw.
He's crazy.
Aw.
They do have the 3D chess. I
Mm-hmm.
know that's the joke.
Gaslight
Son of a
Dan.
bitch.
All right. Other
see.
major important points about this particular episode.
I was saying that Malcolm was.
Did we mention the Nazis?
We did.
Okay.
I was saying that Malcolm was really into everything that was going on.
Yeah.
So they were going to go home. This episode begins with the most fucked up situation of all, which is they were going to go home and
Yeah.
chill, and then they get into
yeah,
this.
good-
fuck.
yeah,
I
I
felt
agree.
for him there. I was
I
like,
did.
oh, that
Oh,
sucks.
yeah.
But he said it
Yeah.
was so sad when
And-
he was like, I thought we were going to go home.
Right, he's the most pissed
DePaul,
off. He's
DePaul.
like, I was ready to like go to every beach.
We're going to go to every beach in the world. DePaul, what were you going to do?
We are 200 years in the past.
In the
You have
past.
enough to worry about without me flying off the handle.
I don't want to be flying off the handle.
But then he ends up going to Volta.
Gotcha.
So, but Malcolm was all into it. He was like, "Oh boy, we get to study like some tactical shit."
There's always every time you get thrown back in time, there's that one guy.
He's
Yeah.
the World War II buff. Yeah.
Yeah, Reed is all talking like T'Pol says. Reed says there's heavy bombing, most of it in eastern Pennsylvania, southern Virginia. It could be an Allied attack. And T'Pol's like, could it pose a danger to the captain? And then Reed's like, the closest fighting is 100 kilometers south of New York City. Incredible. Like he was like, and then there was the whole Stuka thing where he was like going off about like, what does Stuka's have? I wonder. And you know he loved flying that ship into like to blow up the stuff. Whereas T'Pol was all fucking nervous and shit. She gets so wide-eyed when T'Pol's feeling like emotions, you just can tell because your eyes get like real fucking big.
She's not in a lot of this episode, but her character's important.
Interestingly,
Jesus Christ,
The finger came out.
It's like flinging Finger guns at me.
Interestingly, I think is interesting anyway. I was talking about T'Pol being emotional, being
T'Pol.
And we learn actually.
I'm going to go down to Florida.
I believe it's next.
My sister's dead.
I believe it's the next episode, which is Home, where we learn.
That's
where,
right.
Where
We
T'Pol
covered that episode.
Where T'Pol visits her mommy, and her mom was like, "You are an emotional Vulcan."
They don't have any beaches on.
So they
Vulcan.
established that the next episode. I was noticing like T'Pol looked really bummed out about a lot of shit and worried for the captain and Trip. And next episode they're like, "Yeah, T'Pol's an emotional Vulcan." We learn.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I forget which episode. That wasn't too long ago we discussed Home. That was fairly recently on this podcast.
Yeah.
We discussed Home as it happened. So go scroll back a bit. That was good. That was a fun episode.
I don't think they have any beaches on Vulcan.
They got a lot of sand.
They have fire. They have fire beaches.
Beaches.
Yeah, there's fire beaches.
And there's like lava waterfalls.
Lava.
Maybe there's some lava.
Maybe they have geysers.
They said in episode 1, there was
Star Wars episode 1.
How many? No,
no.
The of this two-parter.
Okay.
Can you guess how many words with time in it, including the word time itself, there were in episode 1 and 2?
Do we have time for this sort of shenanigans?
Okay, in episode 1 there's 29, in episode 2 there are 25.
Whoa.
And in episode 1 they said temporal 7 times, in episode 2 they said temporal 12 times.
Right.
Damn.
There's a lot of time and temporal going on.
Temporal. Yeah.
There's not. Speaking of which, there's not enough time to play the game, and I agree with Patrick. Actually, you made a solid point, Patrick. We didn't have time.
Do you have a game?
No, the game. I was asking you guys to guess how many times they said the thing, and you were like, "Do we have time to play this game?"
Oh, I don't know, 30.
We already gave the answer.
What was the answer?
Jesus Christ, you weren't even fucking listening.
I don't remember a number. I remember you citing some examples like time and temporal.
Well, when you're doing the editing, you can find out later.
I guess I'll hear it again.
You
later.
don't even remember yourself saying like, "We don't have time for this game."
Apparently, no. I remember that.
Oh, because you said it. That's what
I remember things I say.
Yeah.
No, I
Fair
don't.
enough.
No, I honestly don't. That's a big problem, actually. Long-time
I have that
listeners will know
problem
that.
too, actually.
I think all three of us have that problem, and it makes for a highly entertaining podcast.
What'd you say?
That's why
I forgot.
I keep telling the same stories over and over.
Yeah.
again.
Well, how about this? We do have one listener email, and I'd like to read the listener email.
It's classified.
In a second, but the final concluding comment I would like to make about this episode is
spaceships.
As ridiculous as some of the plot is, and the temporal Cold War and all that stuff, it is very well performed.
Totally.
And also, even though this is pulling together all those tropes, it's the Nazis, it's the time travel, it's the time travel lady, it's the gangster. It's pulling together all these tropes. I still found it a fairly unpredictable story. I found it an unpredictable story. In other words, we knew they were going to win in the end, but I wasn't 100% sure which way anything was going to go. So I think more power to this episode. Props to this episode for managing to be entertaining, even though it's a bit cobbled together and is not entirely sensible.
Well, there's a lot of moving parts going on.
And a lot of characters.
There's a lot of action, and especially in the first episode and then the end of the second one. But like, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of shit going on. Scene changes everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of shit going on.
There's a lot going on. So interesting, fun episode. All right, how about you want to do a quick listener email?
Yeah, I mean, there was maybe one or two quick comments I was going to make.
All right, you make your comments, and then we'll do a quick email.
There's nothing too crazy.
We'll find out.
I guess Grath gets shot and killed just like he dies in Voyager, Twovix. That's one thing to point out.
But it's pretty early on.
That's fairly interesting.
That's pretty interesting.
That character dies pretty early on.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Another thing they didn't explore is when Krall was all questioning Archer, or not Archer, when he was questioning Vosk and being like, he's like, we can't afford to be pulling this shit at one point. And Vosk is like, yeah, we can do it. You'd think later on that would play into something later, but it doesn't really do much. They don't really go anywhere. But anyways, that's fine. I guess they were just letting us know that shit was dire. But Archer. Is he? I can't remember. He's from upstate New York?
Yes,
really?
he is from upstate.
Okay, because they mentioned that, and so I couldn't remember.
I think he's from Syracuse or something. You know, the water polo capital of the world.
I've been there.
Car 54, where are
Can you name this?
Gunther Tootie.
Can you name the sound effect? Which scene it is? You probably can.
Is that another one of your beat sounds?
No.
Is that the P? That's the P-41, 51s?
No, actually.
Is that when they're in the shuttlecraft getting shot at?
Now that I listen to it back, I was like, oh, it's not so clear. That does kind of say. No, it was the awesome shot of Vosk blasting like Archer and Alicia, trying to blast them away as they're transporting away. I thought that was an amazing shot.
That was
he
a
just
good
grabs
shot.
his alien Nazi like grabs like this
He's just
machine.
like,
Goes,
no.
That was pretty awesome.
That was pretty good.
Speaking of which, Vosk is kind of like. The whole deal is that they're kind of Nazi-like too, like this whole Vosk situation.
Yeah, I mean, he sort of states that outright. He's like, we're both into this whole purity thing.
Yeah, right.
Just in different ways.
He's talking about societies, cultures can be improved through careful manipulation of historical events. They tried to fucking prevent a whole species from gaining sentience.
Which is fucked up, but also makes sense. And it's also one of the things that makes the whole temporal Cold War thing complicated and ridiculous.
Yeah, and I guess that's less of a Nazi thing and more just a fucked up evil thing.
It's more just fucked up. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's hard to go up above and beyond the Nazis in terms of horribleness, but yeah.
I'm not saying it's more evil. I'm just saying it's like less than a Nazi. It's because it's not pushing
philosophically.
It's not pushing.
Pretty fucked up.
It's not pushing someone out because of how they are. It's preventing them from becoming a certain way. So he was kind of an asshole. That whole speech he gave at the end about his greatest scientists, every moment we lived, talking about how we've earned time travel and we can we're allowed to manipulate people. So that was a whole thing. He was kind of, the whole thing was,
There's a lot of whole things in this episode.
There's a lot of whole things.
And some of them were good, some of them were not so good.
Yeah.
That's our conclusion. Now, listener emails.
I just also when T3 Trip Tucker III. Why am I gotta abbreviate it and then explain it? Trip Tucker III and Mayweather, they get all captured and they're surrounded by the Germans and Mayweather's gonna grab it. He looks like he looks at T3, he's like, what am I gonna do? And then
what am I gonna do?
And T3, he just looks back and he just shakes his head.
Yeah.
He just shakes his head. And I was like, yeah, no, don't even bother, man.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Nazis.
I like that. I don't know. I like how he shook his head. I basically like anything that Trip Tucker III does.
Me too. I'm a big fan of Charles Trip Tucker III.
Yeah.
I'm also a fan of reading this listener email.
Oh shit!
Which we haven't gotten to read for
one more thing.
One more thing.
God damn this Columbo bullshit.
That scene when Carmine when he threw that grenade. First of all, when he threw that grenade and exploded the thing. I don't think grenades actually do that. They just shoot out shrapnel. They don't explode things. But also when they were shooting their handgun in that scene, they were recoiling and there was the noise, but there was no visual that a gun was actually being shot. If you look at that scene.
Right. There's no muzzle flash.
Yeah, there's no muzzle flash. That's the word I was looking
because it was fairly dark. You would have seen something.
Anyways, okay.
And in a lot of shows,
actually, it was in the daytime.
Show that shit.
It was in the daytime during that scene, but
it's still
you're telling me
the light is still.
You're telling me that this is inaccurate. It's not true to life.
I'm just saying, they made. There's
certainly something on television.
No, that you can't know because
this guy used to skulk around behind alleys with his guns.
I'm just saying that shows usually include a muzzle flash. That's all I'm saying. They usually include.
They couldn't afford it.
Maybe. Okay, now we can go to listener.
Okay, now we'll make it quick because we go over time.
Okay.
Let's
do it.
All right, because the whole point of this is that we got a few episodes back. This is episode 204, but a few episods back was our 200th episode Special-tacular, which you should go check out if you have not already. It's a great episode of It's Got Star Trek. We had callers call in and leaving messages. We had emails. We had all sorts of fun gags. It was a good time. But we got so many emails that we couldn't read all of them in that episode because it was already a super long episode. So we're trying to sprinkle them out in some of these other episodes, but we keep getting busy and talking too long. And we did that again tonight, but at least we'll get one email out real quick and we'll keep the answers short.
No, we're about at time we usually are.
Hello, all. Congratulations on achieving 200 podcast episodes. Now it's 204. Plus bonus episodes.
Inaccurate.
This was the only person to actually mention our bonus episodes because he said, congratulations on achieving 200 podcast episodes plus bonus episodes. I haven't listened to every one, so forgive me if you've talked about this before, but as someone who would love to do something like a podcast or YouTube videos, one thing that has held me back is the fear of dealing with criticism, both from trolls and from friends, family, colleagues, etc. Do you have to deal with that sort of thing? And if so, how do you handle it? I thought that's a good question about sort of being creative and and some of the drawbacks to, being sensitive to.
Well, as far
as
family goes, I don't think my family listens, and if they do, they don't mention it to me. So I don't even.
If they don't mention it to you, do you think it's because they think it's so funny?
No, it's
because
so
terrible.
It's probably because they think it's so terrible.
My in-law parents listen.
Your in-law parents.
My wife's parents listen, and they like it. And it's cool.
Sometimes Jesse talks like an alien.
It's all right.
My in-law parents.
My in-law parents.
That was an extraterrestrial.
My human in-laws.
I'll say, keeping it brief, because I think it's a good question. First of all, I always encourage people, be creative, go out and do stuff. It's like, what was it on Adventure Time? The dog says, the first step to getting good at something is sucking at it. So first of all, there's that. You have to just do stuff.
You're talking about when the Bender voice says
the Bender
that?
Voice dog.
What's that guy's name?
Jake the dog.
No, but I can't remember the name of the actor.
John DiMaggio.
That's right. Joe DiMaggio? No, not John.
John DiMaggio. Joe DiMaggio is a different guy entirely. But my point being,
come along with me.
I'm in favor.
And the butterflies and bees. I love that song at the end of Adventure.
It's good, but it's be creative, put yourself out there. But obviously, there's different comfort levels people have, and if you are going to be sensitive to critiques, that's something to consider and try to gird against. But honestly,
GERD. I knew someone with GERD once.
Oh my God! My advice is you should use the golf mentality. You should be playing against yourself and not against other people. Don't worry about other people. Do what you think is fun for you, what works for you, and where it's not working, figure out how to improve it. And that's what you should do. And that's how you get better at something. And that's how you'll make something that's worthwhile.
Watch out for those same
and
traps.
Fun to do. It's not that you can't seek out or take constructive criticism or whatever. But first of all, with regard to trolls are hilarious. They just wanted fucking attention. And they say a bunch of nonsense. I don't give I could not care less about what.
I think we generally laugh those guys.
Yeah,
off.
we don't mention it much. We had all sorts of troll behavior.
We don't mention it
we
much.
just laugh and think it's funny because you can guess at what some of these people's lives are like if they're sitting there and trying to get some amusement out of saying some nonsense.
I'm not doing something, so I'm going to make sure you're not going to do something either.
It's honestly kind of hilarious and sad. I mean, you have a certain sympathy for these people because you're like, okay, whatever. So we don't need to pay them much attention. But of course, obviously, we're always looking to improve ourselves in a wide variety of activities that we all participate in. And I think that's the other key. Yeah, we three do this podcast. Jesse's bored of it at this moment, as you can tell. But we three do this podcast because we enjoy doing it. It's fun. And we also do a bunch of other stuff independently and together. That's very different from this podcast. So I think that's another thing is, you have lots of different outlets and they'll help each other. They'll cross-pollinate skills and all that other stuff.
I'll try to keep it brief because we are running a little on time here.
Who cares?
I just know from personal experience performing, like from piano recitals to like
those are the worst.
To band shows like
rock and roll
shows and stuff like that. With the rock shows, like I remember playing, and there's times we've had a bad set, and like we didn't get any reaction from anybody, and luckily no boos. People are usually people are pretty like cool about like not booing. But the point is like afterwards I feel bummed out, but I'm more bummed out. I'm not embarrassed. There's a little bit of embarrassment, but it's more just like, oh man, what can we do to make this better?
Exactly.
And I don't ever feel like I'm questioning what I'm doing.
It's not we shouldn't do this. It's what should we do to improve this? What do we need to do to get to where we want it to be?
Right. But I've always known that because it's something I love to do, that's how I know I'm going to keep doing it. So other people's opinions, yes, it matters. I'm not going to say I don't care about other people's opinion, but it doesn't prevent me from wanting to keep doing it, So.
And I think the key there is if you're curious or not what type of person you are, give it a try. And if you're finding you're not comfortable with it, that just might not be the thing for you, but it doesn't mean you can't find other ways to be creative that may not be exactly what you thought you'd be into, but nevertheless are super awesome because there's so much stuff that you can do out there and to contribute. And anybody being creative in my book is useful, unless you're a piece of shit, I guess. I don't know. I guess you could be a creative piece of shit. Maybe I'm going to kill this guy. If you guys are pieces of shit, don't be creative. Just sort of stay at home and don't bother people. But the rest of you,
come on out
and have some fun. All right. Okay, I think that does it for us this week.
Easy Eddie's Eggplant Extravaganza.
The really cool thing is that next week we already know what we're going to be talking about because there
Awful Aubrey's aubergine.
There are
That was to, he said something about Eddie's eggplant.
Yeah, and he went up to me totally.
He just fucking Jesse just stomped you on your fucking head. Okay, next week.
Let's do it.
Next week, we are blessed to have 2 episodes of Lower Decks airing on the next Thursday, right? So next episode, we will be discussing those 2 episodes of Lower Decks. The first episode is called...
Oh, we're going to do 2?
They're doing the thing where they do 2 again.
They are, but you know what?
Paramount.
I'm not stressing about it.
Paramount Plus.
I'm not going to argue that we should do 2 separate episodes.
No.
Old Patrick might have argued that because of OCD and other things, but in this case...
These are shorter episodes.
They're shorter episodes. They're airing them together, and that's how it's how it's being presented. So that's how we'll do it.
These episodes are always jam-packed with like information.
Episode 1 of season 4 of Lower Decks is called Twovix, but like TWO.
Oh, no.
Twovix, like sequel, like Fast and the Furious. And the episode 402 is called I Have No Bones, Yet I Must Flee, which is a great parody of a Star Trek title. So looking forward to talking about both of those episodes next week, as well as continuous weekly coverage of Lower Decks from that point onward until the conclusion of the 4th season. And then who knows what happens after that because of all the writer strikes and all the other business. So we'll probably be going back to Dan's algorithm or
Flip.
Doing some fun
Maybe
game
they'll have a
shows or
Star
something.
Trek reality show. Maybe I hope they don't. I hope they don't.
God.
Maybe we should make
I
one.
both want that and would be so sad if they did.
I know. I know what
But
you're
in the
saying.
meantime, you can follow us on social media in the whole social media sphere at It's Got Star Trek pretty much everywhere.
Where it is.
Facebook, follow us on YouTube, subscribe and all that. Feedback at itsgotstartrek.com. And of course, the website is www.itsgotstartrek.com. Check us out in all those places. Become super fans, become obsessive, send us all sorts of crazy letters. Make us slightly uncomfortable with how much you like us. That's the ideal.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's kind of the ideal situation for our egos to be in. That's
For
a
real.
slight discomfort in how awesome you think we are. So that might also feed into it, and that might be partially answer the previous letter. Okay, with that, that'll be enough for this week, and we'll talk to you again next week. Goodbye.
Good to see you, Commander. You're alive? As long as you don't pull that trigger. I can't believe it. The building's about to blow up.
Gotcha.